Hey, I'm Corey MacDonald, Land Pro Yamaha, and we're going to talk about a few things here. Mostly we're going to go after this gas tank. I know a lot of people getting on the new models and they got a lot of questions how this thing installs, and you know it's a little bit difficult, but once you kind of figure out the little tricks in the trades, it's pretty easy. But we're going to go ahead with first things first. If you don't own a Vortex, I highly recommend it. It doesn't have a tip over sensor inside the ECU, so it allows you to mount the ECU back to the side of the tank where the original plan was with this IMS before we found out that the tip over sensor is in the OEM ECU. If you're still gonna run the OEM ECU and you're mounting it from under, one thing I do recommend with the bracket is that you zip tie the actual housing of the ECU sheath onto the bracket just to give it a little bit of better grip, because during some heavy racing it could fall off and dangle around. So I recommend that, but my highest recommendation is go spend the money. This right here is gonna help out with starts. It's gonna help out with keeping everything clean and up and high and out of down here where the water is and everything. And on top of that, the bike runs very well with the Vortex ECU right out of the box. It was one of the biggest enhancements we got back in 23 when we first found out the Vortex came out with the ECU for this bike, and it really helped us out by being able to mount the ECU back on the side of the tank. Along with it has the traction control, you know, multiple mapping settings. You can adjust it on the fly as you're racing. You just hit the start button and it actually puts it into a traction control mode. So that's very helpful for the more muddier races that we've been dealing with. But I'm just gonna lay out a couple things that we do with the gas tank. I can't show you the fuel line, but one thing I do recommend with the fuel line is when you're putting on the shark bite clamps that IMS gives you, make sure that where you're clamping is facing away from your gas tank. If you have it spun around to where the gas tank is looking at the gas tank, it will actually hit and it rubs, and it could potentially, you know, break the spigot coming out of the throttle body. You'll see, it's just you look at it and realize, oh yeah, okay, that's the way it needs to go. Another thing that we do is we actually take the ground that comes with the bike and we shorten it, and we put a different connector on the end, and just a little bit more durable, more rugged, and we'll put a little bit of shrink wrap. And what that does just makes it more durable, doesn't flex as much. And we do put a quick connect on our ground. And the reason why we do that is because we try to keep our ground wire bolted to the battery at all times. There's a lot of flexing that's happening here, being right below the seat. The tank flexes also, so we do make sure that we use this bolt right here that's from McMaster-Carr. And we also go ahead and we run a secondary ground that goes to the subframe. We use a time cert. We drill the subframe, we put the time cert in, and this will be connected to the battery and connected to the subframe. The reason why we do that is because we're gonna go back to the mount that the tank flexes. And as that tank is flexing, it will start moving this ground and potentially could lead to where the ground will snap or break. We've had that happen before on a couple practice bikes, and we were like, well, we don't want this happen to the race bikes, even though the race bikes get thoroughly gone through. It was just a precaution. Another thing that I recommend, so when you drill your fuel line vent for the top, your vent line, we buy these right here. You can get them on Amazon. All they are is just a basic vent line. It looks like a valve stem, but it doesn't have the valve stem on the inside. It's a nice drilled out hole. It's a little bit bigger. And we'll have some pictures where it shows where the vent line placement is. We use the OEM vent line, and we actually will put this is a 252 stroke 125. It is a check valve that we use in between. And what this does is it helps us from the gas escaping the tank. With it being directly on the seat and you're putting on your weight, it will come up through the line. And a lot of people wrap it around the crossbar pad, but we don't do that. This is a little bit cleaner and it works very well. You know, we haven't had any failures, but we do keep these changed out pretty routine. They have a little ball bearing in there, and we always just make sure that it's free and it's not getting stuck, and we keep it clean. Another thing that we do is, instead of drilling out the OEM relay mount that's on your battery box, we go and buy a little bit of sheet metal and we and some people don't have access to this, but if you do have access to this, I recommend it. We make our own mount, and this is like the first mount ever made. The other ones are all on the race bikes, and they're really clean and they're done real well. But that just eliminates you from having to drill out the one off your stock battery box and ruining that, because you will have to use a bigger rivet. Sometimes it'll actually melt the plastic on the battery box and damage it a little bit. And then we're gonna go ahead and IMS does give you 2 pieces of foam with adhesive on it. We went ahead and changed it over to these rubber mounts, and the reason why we did that is because the foam allows it to flex a little bit more, where these rubber mounts right here, we have 2. It's 1 on each side, and that keeps it from flexing. That was a big gain that we did when we changed this over for its rubber on rubber to the tank. It definitely kept it from moving so much. And so that right there, we have the part number for that, which we'll have photos of the part numbers, like I said, ×2 of these, because you put 1 on each side. You will only need 1 of the check valves. You'd have to build your own ground wire if you want to go to that extreme. Yeah, I would say if you went to the rubber mounts, that helps out the whole probability of the flexing and snapping the ground wire. Another thing that we do, and you might have to get up and look closer at this. What we do here is, this is a 2018 250/450 FX battery strap. What we do is we use the hardware that IMS provides on this side, and we make another one to match the inside here, and we bend it. And the reason why we bend it is so that strap stays on there. We also use a lot of HydroTurf in the builds that we do here, and we do that to fill the gap so batteries aren't floating around in here. We put a piece on the bottom, we put a piece on top of the battery, and we also put a little bit of foam in between where this little bolt goes. And the reason why we have to use the Allen, if you see, it's a very close fit down in here with the extra ground and with this ground here. Anti-gravity battery, of course, you know, this is the AG801. It's a little bit covered up with the HydroTurf. I can't peel that off, but this is the #1 thing that we put in our bikes to help them start. I know a lot of the Yamahas, more on the 250 side, are notorious about the dead engine starts. One of the biggest things that I tell people is buy the anti-gravity AG801. On the big tank version, you don't have to worry about modifying your seat. If you are running a standard tank with the battery box, you do have to modify the seat a little bit for it to fit around the battery, but Seat Concepts makes a seat pan that's already ready to go, where it's widened and it fits right over the anti-gravity battery. So that right there, like I said, a huge plus for us. AG801 from Anti-Gravity Battery. They're very affordable. They've cranked these motorcycles. We just got a whole shop with Liam, and this past weekend, and even on the 250 side, it is one of the biggest enhancers along with the Vortex ECU. If you have these 2 right here on these Yamahas, you will definitely get better starts, no doubt, and a better performing overall motorcycle. That said, you can go ahead and take a look right here at this vent line. That's where we use the that little valve stem piece I showed you that we get off Amazon. And it literally is gas tank vent is what you can type in. You can find that. Last but not least, we have this right here. A lot of people, they really weren't sure what you do with the dry brake system. And the very beginning, people had dry brake cap IMS provides and the stock seat. So we want to integrate that, and a good friend of mine built the very first one, and it was 3D printed, and it worked very well for the first season. We actually had another guy that helped us out with a couple changes. And then last but not least, I kind of took over the file and I made my final modifications to it to where I think that we needed in certain points, and you know, here it is. And it has the dust cap integrated into the seat piece, and we just change out the piece up here from the metal quick release to a O-ring bushing, or a rubber bushing I should say. And it's just as easy as that right there. But yeah, this is what we use for all the gas stops, and it helps. And they're a big game changer for us, for sure. It just helps us. It's a little bit slower than the traditional dust cap, but with what we're working with, this right here is the best setup that we could find, no doubt. And once it's all together and everything's fine, everything's hooked up, it's a very solid setup. We're getting about 11.7 to 12 liters of gas in each tank, these bikes go a long ways on that amount of fuel. So it's a big benefit putting this big tank on. Like I said, it's a little bit tricky, it's a little bit time consuming, but once you get it done, you can't beat it.